Passover 2023 begins today on April 5th, and prophecy is unfolding in Israel at the Temple Mount. Passover, of course, is one of the Jewish religion's most sacred and widely observed holidays, and it commemorates the story of the Israelites' departure from slavery in Egypt, the story told to us in Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Jewish people observe a week-long festival with a number of important rituals, including a traditional Passover meal, the removal of leavened products from their home, and the retelling of the Exodus tale. And as we move along in the prophetic timeline to the second coming of Jesus Christ, we're seeing so much of the prophecies surrounding Israel and Jerusalem start to be unfolded before our very eyes, and I'll lay out a couple of them in this video. First is about a ceremony that is going to take place during the Passover at the Temple Mount. This article on Israel 365 News says on Passover, a Temple Mount convention aims to show prophecy in action. Isaiah 56:7 is a verse that the Jewish people are really holding on to about a prophecy coming in the future of a house, a temple built there on the Temple Mount, being a house of prayer for all nations. That says, even them I will bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices will be accepted on my altar, for my house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations. And these are the moves that are truly happening right now in Israel that the Jewish people are trying to set up. This article says the Temple Mount 23 Jerusalem Convention will be held on Passover, bringing together Jews and Christians in hopes of bringing the world closer to a house of prayer for all nations. The event will be hosted by the organization Cry for Zion on April 9th at the Begin Heritage Center in Jerusalem. Cry for Zion is a movement of Jews and Christians that support the Jewish people's rights to sovereignty over the Temple Mount, guaranteeing Jewish rights and freedoms in their most holy place. They seek to achieve this goal by educating the public about the temple. The announcement says, quote, "This is a convention dedicated to the holiest place on earth and invites the nations to Jerusalem to discuss, network, get educated, and be inspired with zeal for God's house." According to the tradition, all of Israel will be gathered at that time in Jerusalem to take part of the Passover lamb. And after that, at this convention, Jews and Christians and leaders from both religions will be meeting to talk about the future of the Temple Mount and what's going to take place there and their goals for that location. In a quote from the director of the Cry for Zion Christian Relations, he says, "As a Christian, I know Jesus had a powerful zeal for the Temple Mount. I want the Christian world to discover the same passion for what makes this place the holiest place in the world and what that means for the church. My Jewish friends naturally have a native understanding of the Hebrew prophets and biblical vision of Zion that I'm also excited to explore together." Jerusalem and Israel absolutely play a massive role. Almost the entire role is going to be taking place in that part of the world. It will be a worldwide end time scenario, but it will 100% be centered in Jerusalem and Israel. The more that I understand prophecy, the clearer that this gets. And there's a couple of prophecies that I'll get into in this video completely describing that, and two I'll mention now, and then I'll get into more a little bit later. But first is Revelation 21:2, and it says, "Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband." You can imagine where New Jerusalem is going to be. It's going to be where Old Jerusalem used to be, and there's plenty of other verses supporting that. There's also another verse in Zechariah 14 about Jesus where he's coming down when he comes in the last days during his second coming. And that says in Zechariah 14:4, "And in that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall be split in two from east to west, making a very large valley. Half of the mountain shall move toward the north and half of it toward the south." Obviously the Mount of Olives, here Jesus is in Jerusalem. That's just the exact epicenter of where it is. Even in Matthew 24, when he's talking about the Great Tribulation, he says, "Let those in Judea not go down into their houses to grab something, and let them flee to the mountains out of Jerusalem, because that will be the epicenter of where these last end times events will truly take place." But in relation to the Passover sacrifice on the Temple Mount, of course, there's always pushback because there's always contentions there. And here's another article that says rabbis petition government to allow Passover sacrifice on the Temple Mount, but Arabs decry the attempt. The Jewish people, of course, want to do their sacrifice on the Temple Mount, their Passover lamb sacrifice, but they have to do it outside on stone altars because they don't have the temple location within this article, it talks about how they want to get the red heifers ready to purify the temple location so they can do it actually there next year, and the red heifers to be sacrificed to purify the area for the third temple and for where they will do the sacrifices. They'll be ready for the Passover of next year, just 1 year away. Here is a verse out of the Sota, a tractate of the Talmud Jewish literature, talking about the Messiah that they're expecting. And it says in Sota 9:15, "In the footsteps of the Messiah, arrogance will increase, prices will increase, the government will turn into heresy, and there will be no reproach. The meeting place of scholars will become a bordello, sin-fearing people will be detested, truth will be missing." As we know, the Jewish people don't currently accept Jesus as the Messiah, but it's a massively huge important understanding for them to realize and to come to in the last days. Jesus even told the Jewish people of the time a very specific message that he's not even coming back to the earth until they accept him as the Messiah. In Matthew 23 verse 39, this is Jesus speaking to the Jewish religious people of the time who at the time weren't accepting him either as Messiah. This is after the triumphal entry, so he's already come. And here Jesus says to the Jewish religious people of the time, "For I say to you, you shall see me no more till you say, 'Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord.'" So it's a pretty important thing for the Jewish people to realize Jesus is the Messiah, because when they do, then Jesus will come back. And of course, we all want Jesus to come back. So he even specifically laid that out for them. We're also told in Romans 11:11, talking about Israel's rejection of Jesus as the Messiah and how salvation was brought to the Gentiles through this. It says, "I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? Certainly not, but through their fall, to provoke them to jealousy, salvation has come to the Gentiles." So the Jewish people will eventually see through all of the prophetic events that will be laid out. The temple built, the abomination of desolation will take place. Then the Jewish people will be provoked to jealousy, like it's said here, because salvation has come to the Gentiles, and they will finally see the truth that Jesus is the Christ, the Messiah, and what they thought it was not the case. And then they will say, "Blessed is Jesus who came in the name of the Lord," like Jesus told them. Then Jesus comes back, stands on, and during that whole period, then he'll stand on the Mount of Olives, like told in Zechariah. This is the timeline that's going to be taking place in the last days, and it surrounds Israel. So it's pretty important to be praying for them, and to be praying for them to come to the realization that Jesus Christ is the Messiah. Another article on Israel 365 News says Jews and Christians come together to reinstate the biblical commandment of the red heifer. Like I've covered a few times, the red heifer that will be used to purify the land or the third temple itself or the altar, or however they decide to do it, will be ready for Passover next year, 2024. Those things are moving in line. Just on more stuff in the prophetic timeline surrounding Israel and Jerusalem. And one more verse just confirming this, and how Israel and Jerusalem and this area is just such the epicenter of what the Bible and just the fulfillment of all things to come truly is in Revelation 21. And if you look through that whole chapter, you can see one of the headings for it is all things made new. Then we're talking about the new Jerusalem. Then we hear the glory of the new Jerusalem, just telling us that there's a new Jerusalem that will be coming, because when Jesus comes, all things will be made new. When he's finally accepted by everybody except those who followed after the beast, and he comes to rid all of the earth of the evil and defeat that evil finally once and for all. And again, the earth will be made new, everything will be made new, the heavens and the earth. And then there will be no more need for a physical temple, because God and Jesus will be the temple. And it tells us this in Revelation 21 verse 22 and verse 23, and this is talking about New Jerusalem. "But I saw no temple in it, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are its temple. The city had no need of a sun or the moon to shine in it, for the glory of God illuminated it. The Lamb is its light." Jesus clearly is the Messiah, the Christ, the Savior of the world. It's as clear as it could possibly be to see. All the Old Testament prophecies are fulfilled through him, ones that only had to be and could only be fulfilled through him, as well as the future timeline of things that just make no possible sense, that things written down 2,000 years ago are coming to a perfect fulfillment now. The red heifer, the third temple, Israel being a thing, the entire world caring about this one little thing, this one little section of land in Jerusalem and Israel. I mean, why? It's like, what's the size of that thing? Like the size of New York even, or something extremely small. Yet the world is constantly talking about Israel and Jerusalem. It's because it's hugely important. It's everything to the end times timeline of how things are going to unfold. So we can keep our eyes on that, and again, pray for the Jewish people and for Israel and Jerusalem and these people to realize Jesus is the Christ, because just like Jesus said, I want to gather you as like a hen gathers her chicks, but you were not willing. And Jesus said, I'm not coming back until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So it's an important thing to pray for them to come to this clear as day revelation and understanding that Jesus Christ is the Messiah. Let me know in the comments section what other prophecies surround Israel and Jerusalem. I mean, there is so much, it's just unbelievable. I've got other videos planned in the future on the same subject because it is just amazing to see that it's the epicenter. And then when you do, and then you look at what's going on in the world and seeing it all start to happen, it's just like incredible to witness. So let me know that in the comments. Thanks for watching, and God bless.